Welcome everyone to our webinar for October. Got a few questions that we've gotten over the last few months from some inspectors, and then there's also going to be some time for Q&A as well if there's any additional questions. I always like these webinars. We've done a couple of these so far. We get a lot of questions from inspectors, and we seem to answer the same handful every few months. So yeah, it's good to see what's on all of your minds and what you're reaching out to us for more clarity on, and yeah, give you some opportunities to ask us some questions live as well. So just a few moments. I see a few more people trickling in. So I'll be answering questions. If you have questions, as the webinar goes on, feel free to send them to us in the chat, and I will answer questions as I go through the presentation. There's also time at the end for more questions as well. And yeah, hopefully we have time to get to everyone's questions, and hopefully we get you some good information this month. I'm gonna go ahead and just get started. So just a little bit of introduction to us. If this is your first webinar, tell you a little about Sporecyte, tell you a little bit about our accreditation that we recently achieved, and then questions, primarily indoor air quality questions that we get, some mold, some general air quality for the home inspector audience, and then there'll be time for some more Q&A. You can ask any questions you want. It doesn't have to be related to the other questions in this presentation. So my name is Dylan McIntosh. If this is your first time watching one of our webinars, we kind of rotate who gives these here at Sporecyte. This month you've got me. I'm the lab director and product group manager for Sporecyte. I'm a certified industrial hygienist who's done a ton of indoor quality assessments, from studio apartments into large scale industrial settings. I've done a ton of different types of assessments and in many different environments. So who are we? We are TechCyte. That's the name of our company, founded in 2013. We are primarily a software company where we specialize in machine learning and artificial intelligence related to digital microscopy. We use computer vision to create analyses for laboratories using air, liquids, and smearable media types. We're used by all sorts of different industries: labs, pathologists, doctors, vets, and home inspectors. There's three product lines or verticals at our company. Environmental is under the Sporecyte brand. Our human analysis is under the TechCyte brand, and our animal analysis is under the VetScan Images brand. Our lab is located in Orem, Utah. That's where you send us samples. That's where we get them prepped and scanned and analyzed. We are an MPAP participant. That's proficiency testing. We have a Texas mold analysis laboratory license. You might say, well, you're in Utah, why do you have a Texas license? Texas is the only state in the US that requires licensing for a mold laboratory. So that's why we've got a Texas license. And we have recently become accredited under ISO IEC 17025. So that's exciting news. Expect to hear more about that very soon in emails and other notifications as well. That's a pretty big deal to us. We're excited to finally have that achievement. So here at Sporecyte, we're all about making your lives better as inspectors and providing you the best quality analysis and product we can, so you can deliver that to your clients as well. So quick, accurate, and affordable services. We use an AI-powered platform to give you same-day reports that you, your clients, real estate agents, or anyone else who comes across our reports can trust. And we're all about consistent, high-quality results. So this is something that we launched a few months ago, but just in case you didn't know, same-day turnaround time is now standard. So if you get your samples to our lab before 1 p.m., we will get the report out to you that same day. And we also have available overnight shipping for return shipping. If you use our labels, it's $31.99 from anywhere in the US, and we get it next day by 10 a.m. So if you're all about getting things turned out fast, we've got the options for you there. So the whole part of this webinar is questions from inspectors that we've gotten over the last few weeks or months, primarily related around indoor air quality. So one that we get a lot, we are a mold laboratory, but we do get questions related to other indoor air quality concerns. In my career, I've done assessments in all sorts of residential settings. I've come and done full indoor air quality assessments during a real estate transaction. Might not be something you guys are looking to offer, but just to give you more knowledge and more general information that you can share with your clients. So common residential indoor air quality concerns. These are the most common. There's a countless number of things that you could be looking for, but most of them are pretty specialized. These common ones are things that kind of give you a good checkup. This is kind of the vital signs for indoor air quality. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. It's airborne chemicals, basically. They come from any number of things. Personal care products, cleaning products, air fresheners, building materials, furniture. All of these things give off VOCs. And at certain levels, they become irritants, and there's certain specific VOCs that may have other health concerns as well. Particulate matter, that's just generalized particles and debris in the air. These are microscopic in size. The classes, you may be familiar with PM10, which is typically used for outdoor air quality. You can assess a good idea of your city's outdoor air quality by looking at things like PM10. Indoors, we're looking at particulate matter mostly in smaller size categories, 10, 5, 2, 1, even submicron particle sizes. Carbon dioxide, CO2, that's given off from living things as they breathe, and it's a good marker for ventilation. If your space is very airtight, carbon dioxide levels will naturally build. If you have artificial ventilation or natural ventilation, you have a window open, those carbon dioxide levels should be about ambient, which is about 400 parts per million. So yeah, very high levels. There are some concerns. There's a lot of literature out there and studies on how high CO2 levels can impact students in classrooms and learning. So it's more of a marker for ventilation in the residential setting. You typically don't see a huge buildup of that to the point where it would be detrimental. Carbon monoxide, if you have gas burning appliances, carbon monoxide could be an issue. It's from the incomplete combustion from combustion appliances. Typically, you might have a carbon monoxide alarm in a home. Those are designed to go off at very extreme levels that are immediately dangerous. Chronic, moderate level exposure to carbon monoxide could be an irritant. It can cause some health concerns. You know, it's not immediately dangerous to your life, but chronic exposure to those things can have health effects. And these are all things that typically are measured by sensors. There's a range of different sensors that are out there on the market for measuring these things. There are ones that kind of do all in one. There are even consumer products out there. Some air purifiers now have these sensors built in, or smart thermostats. There's even little air quality modules that some people may have in their home. There's any number of ways that these can be measured and monitored over time. So how can you as an inspector identify when an air quality concern might be present? Obviously, if you see visible mold growth or moisture, you may have a mold concern. But what about some of these other things that I just talked about? A big one is odor, and odor is subjective. Some people have very good sense of smell. Some people have very poor sense of smell. So it's not always a perfect indicator, but odors can be an indicator of a number of air quality issues. So musty odors, um, earthy, damp, that type of description, that may be an indication of some sort of microbial problem or some sort of water problem that you may want to consider assessing or recommending assessing for. A chemical-like odor, it may be offensive, but it may be just something that's present, but not necessarily irritating. Think of like the new car smell, right? That's something many people enjoy. It's most likely an indication of some level of VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And another complaint that I used to get a lot is stuffy air. That could be a number of things. Could be a combination of low indoor humidity. It could be a high level of particulate matter, or potentially high or moderate levels of CO2 or carbon monoxide. Again, this may not be something you're looking to add to your services, but there are sensors out there that consumers can buy, or professional or prosumer level sensors that a home inspector may be interested in to add these sorts of services. Another screening tool, indoor air quality, that you can add to your tool belt of things you can offer is certainly something that you could do with a little more specialized training and not too much startup cost. Again, it's becoming more common. You see these things built into a lot of different devices. Like I said, air purifiers or humidifiers, dehumidifiers, smart thermostats, any one of those things you could purchase with these sorts of sensors built in, or a standalone device. In new construction or recent major renovations, those are good opportunities to consider air quality testing. When you're bringing new materials in, new carpets, new paint, new raw materials, adhesives, things like that, those all contribute to particulate matter and volatile organic compounds in the space. And same with the recent renovation. It doesn't have to be a new build. It could be just a major renovation. That's a point where you may want to consider air quality testing. And another thing is related to outdoor air quality. The outdoor air quality will directly influence the indoor air quality. So if a home is near to a major highway or industrial sites where there's a lot of activity, you may have a localized particulate matter issue or carbon dioxide issue if there's a lot of automobiles, as well as other things from combustion and diesel emissions that you may be concerned with and you may want to consider testing for. So when should air quality be tested? Should it be seasonal, after an event, or during a home inspection? There's not a one answer to this, because these air quality concerns are variable. There's any number of different things that could be going on. They're really diverse. Some may be seasonal. Maybe it's something that happens over the winter. I've had a lot of cases where someone's indoor relative humidity might be very, very low, and that causes irritation to them. We might not think of temperature and humidity as an air quality issue, and it kind of is in a way. It's a comfort issue. Same with indoor. If you have a furnace that's not maintained properly and it may not be having very complete combustion, you could have carbon monoxide issues in the winter that you don't have in the summer. Specific events, a major storm comes through, you have damage to your roof, it develops a leak. Now you may have a potential mold or bacterial microbial problem to assess for. And there may be things that are just chronic, always present, that may need to be assessed for. There's really no one size fits all. It's very situationally dependent. But a home inspection is a good opportunity for a screening of the property. You might not catch all possible concerns, but you get a good baseline as to how the property was and the air quality was at the time of your home inspection. So we'll shift gears a little bit, and this is more of a Sporecyte specific question, asking about what makes our AI-powered testing more reliable or different than the traditional methods. So the first and foremost, the biggest difference is we read 100% of the sample trace. And I'll show you what that means in just a moment. But the accepted standard method requires a minimum of about 25% of the trace to be read, and then you can extrapolate the data out. So most commercial labs out there read anywhere from 25 to maybe 50%. And this is due to the effort it would take for an analyst to do it. It would be very difficult and it would take a lot more time for a human analyst to read the entire trace and count every object on it. So they decided that they will read a portion and extrapolate the data out. And here's a visual representation. On the left, if you look at the light colored passes, or as we call traverses, those might be the parts of the slide that get read by the analyst, and they would count and identify the objects in those slices. And the one issue is those slides are not evenly distributed. Mold tends to have clumps, debris tends to clump as well, so it's not a perfect distribution. So if you don't read every single traverse or slice, you may miss crucial objects that where even just a few Stachybotrys may have a totally different interpretation on that slide if you don't catch it, or if you do. So for us, we read the entire 100% of the sample trace, which will just allows us to have a lower limit of detection, as well as making sure we're not missing any of those hypercritical types. So AI assisted. Now it's not all computer. There is a human analyst that reviews the slides, but the AI assisted means it's very repeatable. The AI doesn't get tired or have a bad day, and allows our human analysts to analyze slides up to 5 times faster and in a more comfortable way. In a normal lab, analysts are going to be looking into a microscope all day, using hand counters or even manual, little scratch paper and pen to keep track of their counts. Where our system, it's fully digital. Our analysts look at the results on the computer screen, and the counting and calculations, all of that's done automatically. They just confirm or make improvements or changes to what the AI model has predicted for them. And then another benefit is our slides are digitized. We use these whole slide scanners, which are essentially a very elaborate microscope with a high resolution camera that collects really fine images of the slide, and it gets run through our software. And we can retain those images almost indefinitely. That image, that scan of the slide can be reread any number of times without degradation, whether that be for quality assurance purposes, training, or just archival, where a physical slide will start to break down within a number of days or weeks. And after about 30 days, it's really broken down to the point where it's probably not very reliable to reread that slide in the future. I've got a question here that I'll answer here. Are there any plans to add a mycotoxin screening to your capabilities? So mycotoxins are different. They are the chemical component that these mold spores and other microbial types give off, and they create these for a number of different reasons. And because they're chemical based, it's not something we can see, capture, or count using the methods that we use to count and classify mold spores. Mycotoxin testing at present is a pretty specific chemical-based analysis. So you'd be sending it to a laboratory that has some advanced chemistry type analyses, which we do not offer at the time. It's not something that is suited for kind of our expertise, which is visualization and uh, automating microscopy-based tests. It is something we may be able to, in the future, have a subcontractor do, or have a referral if you needed to do that. But across the industry, it's not likely with the current technology that exists to have a combined spore trap or surface sample direct examination like we're doing here and a microtoxin screen. Those types of tests are done a completely different way. So it's not something we're looking to add in the immediate future internally, but it may be something that we may have referrals or at least additional information we can provide to inspectors so they know who or how to do that kind of testing. So we'll go ahead back to the presentation. Here's again that slide representation of 30% of the trace versus 100%. So what are some indoor air quality particulates home inspectors should be most concerned about? Now, there's specific things that I'm not going to mention here that are outside of the home inspector's typical wheelhouse, like respirable crystalline silica or asbestos, things like that, probably a little beyond what a home inspectors are taking a look at. Lead or some other industrial components as well, we won't really discuss, but a common one is carbon dust, and this comes mainly from, could be mainly from tire debris or other road dust, combustion-related particulates from automobile exhaust, gas appliances, or fireplaces. Carbon dust is one that I see somewhat frequently in pretty high levels on spore trap cassettes. Whether it's a gas or wood burning fireplace, someone likes to burn candles all day long, they live near a major roadway, those are all things that can contribute to carbon dust in the home. And total particulate under 2.5 microns is another one that we measure on our reports. The smaller the particulate size, the deeper it can get into the respiratory tract, and the more concerning health issues could be present. Larger particles will get filtered out through your nose or your upper respiratory system, and they don't get deep into the lungs, and they can't cause as much damage as these smaller particulates. Now, 2.5 microns, as far as particulate sizes go, is a relatively big particle. When we start looking at submicron, micron, fine or ultra fine particulate, 0.3 microns or even smaller, those are the ones we're talking about with have the most serious health effects as far as generalized particulate go. The issue is the resolution. We can't see a particle that small with the level of magnification we use for mold testing. So 2.5 microns is the smallest class we have, or less than 2.5 microns. Typically, these are particles in the 1 to 2.5 micron range. What are some steps a homeowner can take to improve air quality if a test reveals elevated mold levels? So mold specifically, you'd want to consult with the remediation professional to determine the cause and how to address these things in a proper way. With mold, if you've been on our webinars before, if you're familiar with mold testing, correction of the underlying moisture problem really is the key in addressing a mold issue. If you don't address the moisture problem, then the mold will continue to come back. And making sure remediation follows the standards such as IICRC S520 will address both the building materials that are impacted as well as air and other surfaces. And part of this standardized method is containment and making sure that contamination controls are in place to make sure that there's no spread of any sort of air quality issue outside of the impacted area during the remediation. When you're doing remediation, it's very easy to create a much larger problem than was before you started doing demolition or cleaning, because you're releasing these spores into the air in huge concentrations. And if you don't have the proper control set up, it's very easy to make that problem much larger. We've had a lot of questions about wildfire smoke and other environmental-based factors and what can be done to test that. So it's most definitely a fact that external environmental factors can impact indoor air quality. Outdoor air quality is measured in a lot of different ways, but there's one that you can find pretty easily. It's probably even on your smartphone's weather app, the AQI. It's a generalized scale as far as how the outdoor air is in that day. It takes into consideration particulate matter and other contaminants. Testing with those, testing can be done with low-cost sensors or by calling a professional. Things like fires, wildfires or structural fires can leave a huge number of fire-related particulates in structures from smoke damage. And in those instances, you probably want to hire or refer to a professional who specializes in that kind of work. It's a very specialized field, and knowing how and where to test for those things can make a big difference for your client and making sure things get cleaned up effectively. So I've got a couple other questions, I think. I've got a question here that says, I've had people ask me if air samplings read what could be in the walls. So it is possible that if I were to take an air sample of the room I'm in, and let's say this wall next to me is an exterior wall, and there's some sort of issue allowing moisture to get inside of this wall cavity, and I don't see any mold visibly, or I don't see any signs of water damage, because maybe it's just every so often the water comes on it. It's not a constant water issue, but maybe every 3 weeks enough water gets in and gets wet for a day or two and then dries. It's possible if I took an air sample here, I would detect an elevated level of mold, and I don't see any visual clues. And it could be detecting that hidden mold issue. When you have penetrations right here, I've got an electrical outlet, things like that. Those are pathways that mold spores could be released from. It's not always going to be the case. There are ways to take more specialized inside of wall samples by drilling a hole or entering in through one of those penetrations, like I mentioned, a electrical outlet cover, things like that. It's not. It could detect a positive indication, but a negative indication isn't going to necessarily rule out. If I took an air sample in this room and it came back as normal, I still can't say without a doubt that there's no mold issues inside of any of these walls. It might be that there is a issue potentially hidden that is not being detected, that if I were to cut into the wall could be found. It's just a limitation of not being able to have x-ray vision or physically open up every single wall cavity. But if it is impacting the air quality, then it would be detected. So we're running short on time, so I'm going to go kind of fast here on the last couple slides. What's the big difference between air sampling and surface sampling for mold? So air samples are quantitative tests, meaning we count and identify the spores there, and we tell you the results in a number per cubic meter of air. It assesses the air quality, and as I just said, it can potentially discover hidden issues that we can't see or access with other means. Surface samples is a qualitative. It's a presence absence with some grade scale there from light, moderate, and heavy. It's an assessment of the condition of that building material. So I'm saying I sampled this wall and there is no mold on this wall, or there is mold on this wall. Now, surface growth on a material does not necessarily indicate an elevated level of mold in the air. It's strictly saying there is mold on that surface or not. What are the differences between the two different types of surface tests that we do? So we analyze swabs and tape samples. My strong recommendation and my strong preference is, in most instances, a tape swab is preferable, or tape slide is preferable, sorry. Um, and the main reason is you get a better analysis with a tape sample or a surface slide sample if you buy the prepared tape slides. And that's because if there is structures on the surface you're testing, the tape actually maintains how they appear on the surface. So we can actually see clusters and hyphae and spores connected. It gives us a better picture of what is actually happening. It is easier for us to determine growth that way. Now, they're not perfect because they can get overloaded easily. If there's dust, debris, soil, fine, gravel, things like that, it will overload that tape slide, making it very hard to analyze, which is where swabs are very helpful. They're easy because you can get to hard to reach places because they're so skinny and long. If the surface is very wet, you'll have a hard time using tape on it. So a swab is great in those instances. But the main downside is they disturb the growth on the surface as it gets collected. So those relationships, those spatial relationships of where things are on that surface are not retained for the analysis. So it means it can be a little harder for us to determine if it's growth or just settled mold spores. And I've got another question here that I'll answer because this is another good question. Matt had asked, what threshold does Sporecyte use for the mold elevation level in our reports? And I can say it's not a single threshold. It's pretty elaborate logic as to how we determine that. And it's mainly a relationship from the outdoor sample to the indoor samples. And each class will have different logic of determining that. And it's pulled from a number of different sources, normie standards, as well as some international standards. I wouldn't have enough time to get into exactly each class's threshold, nor really would I. It's a bit of our secret sauce here. If I gave it away, then our competitors could use a similar analysis method. So how can you compare? This is a question we got just the other day. So how do you compare outside results when volume of inside and outside may vary? So the volume of air in the room or outside, the total volume in that space doesn't matter for comparing samples. What matters is the volume of air that you sample. So a 5-minute sample on these Spore Trap cassettes that are sampled at 15 liters per minute. It's a 75-liter sample. And if you took a 10-minute sample, 150-liter sample, that is used when we calculate our reported number. So when you see numbers on our report, they're reported on spores per cubic meter of air. It's normalized to this figure so it can be compared. So the result from a 75-liter sample or 150-liter sample in the number spores per cubic meter, those are directly comparable. You can do an apples to apples comparison to those tests or any other tests that result in a spores per cubic meter, because that's, like I said, it's been normalized to a count per volume. And since we're using calibrated pumps with a known duration of time, we know how long things have been sampled for. So we know how many liters were sampled. So we then could get that unit per volume unit that we report on. So like I said, it's apples to apples comparison. What are some common myths that you hear about mold and indoor air quality that should be debunked? So we hear this a lot from homeowners, realtors, all sorts of people. Oh, that discoloration you see in my bathroom, it's not mold, that's just mildew. Truly, mildew grows on plants, doesn't grow on tile or building materials. What you may be calling mildew is likely either mold, yeast, or bacteria, some sort of microbial growth that may be superficial and easily cleaned. When you have that pink discoloration on a shower curtain that doesn't get cleaned often, that's a yeast buildup that can be cleaned with household cleaners. It's not necessarily a mold issue that needs to be remediated by professionals. So a lot of the times those are used interchangeably. Another myth is black mold is toxic black mold. That's the worst kind of mold. You got to burn the house down when you have it. Many black molds are not toxic, and many toxic molds don't grow in black. You can't tell just based off of the color, the severity of it. Toxic black mold, that is a, nickname or a referral to Stachybotrys, which is a toxigenic mold, but you respond to Stachybotrys the same way you do to any other mold types with proper remediation. I got a question here for unused air cell cartridges that are close to expiration. Is there any kind of trade-in credit available for those? Or are they a loss if the expiration date is reached? Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any sort of refund or return credit for expired air cassettes. We do a good job in making sure that we provide you with the freshest cassettes, whether it's the aerosol or air trap cassettes, 6, 9, or 12-month expiration, depending on the manufacturer. So we basically get new cassettes in every month. So what goes out is pretty fresh. So it's a reminder to order as much as you think you'll need. You don't want to run out, but you don't want to over order because these are consumable. You can still send us expired cassettes. It will be noted on your report, but for the most part, they typically don't lose too much efficacy if they're expired a short period. I wouldn't recommend it, but certainly you can make that decision on your own. The new air trap cassettes that we stock now have a longer expiration time than the aerosols do. Currently, they're at 12 months. They're working on some tests to see if we may be able to push that out even to say 18 months or even 2 years possibly in the near future. Here's some pictures of mold and mildew growth. So just visual difference of what that mold looks like and what is mildew. So I'm a few minutes over, said about 7 minutes over. So I'll see if we have any other immediate questions show up. If we didn't get to your question, we have a record of all the questions so we can get back to you via email. If you have questions that come up after this chat that you don't have in mind right now, but maybe it comes to you later in the evening, send us a message through our website. You can reach out to us via email, give us a call. We are pretty accessible if you have further questions after this. So again, reach out to our sales or support team by giving us a call or an email. Go on to sporecyte.com if you want to send us in any sort of questions you might have. So I think that's a wrap on this month's webinar. I got a question here. I don't know if I'm the person to answer this for you, but I got a question of how do customers navigate the legal issues if they want to blame the home inspector? The answer is, I'm not a lawyer or a legal professional. And if your client, the customer wants to navigate that, they need to contact a legal professional. And you as a home inspector, if someone has a legal challenge to your work, you'd be wanting to get in touch with your professional insurance carrier. Most of the time they will. Part of the reason you pay for that professional insurance is this exact situation. So they will most likely have a legal team that will take up this case as a part of your insurance coverage. No one wants to deal with that, but sometimes that's doing business. So always refer to a legal professional if you have any legal questions, whether that's you or your client. All right, so with that, I'll wrap up this webinar for October. We'll see you again next month. Yeah, be on the lookout for some emails about our recent accreditation. It's a pretty exciting time for us. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next month.